Middle Podcast, the podcast dedicated to the music, movies, and culture of Generation X.
What is up, slackers, and welcome to another episode of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. And I got to tell you, I've been having a fight with my computer. I've been having this long-standing battle with my microphone and the inability to go back to what had been, for a period of time, a nice stereo recording. Now, sometimes software is updated and changed and different versions of web browsers and all that. So then I began to think I had some setting improperly clicked somewhere. So I've done about, 4 or 5 tests, just trying to figure out what is going on. I thought perhaps maybe it was a microphone problem. Sure enough, I went to a couple other different types of recording software. GarageBand, for example. Stereo. Didn't have to fiddle with anything. Couple of other things that I tried. Fine. So I'm currently using StreamYard to record my podcast. And I've been doing this because I like to have the video available, because someday I'll get around to editing everything and getting it up on YouTube, right? Well, part of the reason that I keep sending it to YouTube is that the audio version to YouTube is that might never happen. Excuse me, at least not some of the older episodes. I was doing it for a while, and because I record typically the night before, I just usually can't get it all done, just life being what it is. But I'm like, come on, the least that I can do is have a stereo podcast. And yeah, I cannot get it to work. So I think either I need to change browsers, or I'm going to have to start recording the podcast a different way. And I've been fiddling with things like OBS and all of that, because there's some multimedia content that I am planning on doing that I've actually got really fleshed out finally. I like to format things. I don't like to just take chances with certain things. I like to be cautious. Like the podcast, once I decided I was going to do the podcast, once I got some of the basics down, I just kind of went for it and winged it. And, you know, I'm kind of seeing some of the positive and negatives of that. For example, having this audio issue that I can't seem to resolve. Nevertheless, enough about the womp womp complaining bits. It's just so frustrating, because I'm like, I plug in GarageBand, boom, right away, both signals, which for me, I have to take off the headphones, listen to each one, because I am deaf in one ear. So, okay, listen to the right, listen to the left. Hey, great. One shot and done. So I know it's not the microphone. I know it's not my audio interface. That can really only leave one thing. It's got to be StreamYard. So anyway, this week's episode stems from a conversation I had with my wife. So Mrs. Slacker and I, we were just sitting there shooting the shit. Excuse me. We just got done binging the show Reacher. I would greatly recommend it. A lot of fun, really good. Yeah, it's kind of violent. I haven't read the books. I think I'd like to. They're, it's interesting characters. Really enjoyed it. We were just talking about stuff and talking about different shows and things that are on there. And one of the things that comes up somewhat frequently, and we get a kick out of it, is Ted, which, as you know, Ted is a TV series now, a prequel. Now, I think I mentioned that my wife prays with Mark Wahlberg, and his Hallow app. I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago, you walk into your room at night and you just hear Mark's voice doing the Our Father. It is something else, man. But anyway, there's a scene in Ted. I think it's the first movie. And Ted is sitting there with John, and he's like, Yeah, so I met this girl. Yeah, we're dating. And he's like, oh, yeah, what's her name? And it's like, white trash girl's name. Go. And he's like, okay. And he starts going through the list of names. And he just starts hitting all of them. And the first one that really makes me laugh is Mandy, Sandy. It's great, right? It's a really funny bit. And he's like, wait a minute. Is it one of those girls and her name ends with a Lynn? Yeah. Right. And he's like, Mandy Lynn, Tammy Lynn. Right. It's like, Sammy Lynn. Damn. Anyway, what kind of brought this all about was the hilarity of names and how they tend to be very generational. And one of the things that kind of, so what I do for a living, I see a lot of databases of names. And I know for our own kids, their names are not, well, our daughter's name is somewhat irregular. It's an homage to a family name, a little bit different spelling. My oldest, his name became quite popular somewhere around that time. A couple years after he was born, it really blew up. And our youngest, his name is kind of up and down as far as popularity. But, oh my gosh, the rest of the kids nowadays all have like these same freaking names. The boys are like Braden and Caden and Jaden. The girls are all Sophia or Isabel or Sophia, Isabel, Ava, Emma, like very much like 5 of them per class, if not more. And some of the databases that I look at, it's like Ava. And it's like, how many Avas are there? How many Braden, Caden, Aiden? Like, it's kind of mind-blowing. But then I had to think about my own name. My name is 70s fucking heaven. And it's just so curious how these things become so popular where everyone goes, oh. Now, I know part of the reason that I was named what I was named. So here's a quick side story. So, teen parents. My dad, not my biological dad. And he's making an honest woman of my mother, as they say, right? He was definitely on the list of potential baby daddies if this was an episode of Maury Povich, or one of what's the judge? You are not the father. Yeah, that's me. And they were trying to decide on names. Now, because my mom was going to be marrying the man that signed my birth certificate, we're going to have this little name, Ek, just 2 letters, right? E-K. You always want to make sure that there's a particular flow to a name, and that's not always easy with a 2-letter Ek. I mean, there's not a lot to it. There's a lot of ways names can go wrong with that, right? Particularly growing up when we did. Nowadays, kids think my kid's name, our family name, is cool. And rarely has there been anything other than people really like to use the last name instead of the first name. Particularly all the kids playing sports. Ek! Makes sense. But my parents were trying to decide on names. So my dad, who probably didn't get much authority, let's put it that way, particularly if he was only a maybe potentially the father. He thought the name Jed, not Jedediah. Jedediah Ek, that would have been a humdinger. Jed. Okay, Jed Ek, 5 total letters. That's crazy. Then another name that was quite popular at a time, and we'll get into that in just a minute, Eric. I will tell you that there have been so many times in my life that people have looked at me and go, oh, I thought your name was Eric. No, bro, that was a maybe. But yes, it's of the time. And because they could hardly decide on, between Jed and Eric, there was a movie. I'm pretty sure the timeline works out here. Because you never know how, family stories can become, I guess, somewhat, was it called apocryphal? You're not sure if they're exactly correct or not. Yeah, that's what I thought. So the movie Jason and the Argonauts, which came out in 1963, right? So Jason and the Golden Fleece. For whatever reason, my mom was really into that movie. And there was a lot of stop motion animation. They ended up playing that at a drive-in as like a double feature or something. But anyway, so that's kind of where the Jason thing came in. Kind of a lot of talk about like Greek mythology, which is great. It's cool. So no middle name because they couldn't decide on the first name. Well, Jason became quite a popular name, which is where we're at now. So what I did was I took a look. There's a lot of different things, but sometimes it all just comes down to something as simple as the Social Security Name Index. It's the Social Security Index that I used when determining exactly what we were going to use for the Gen X years. I saw something online today that said 1960 to 1980. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. You don't know what you're talking about. So it's interesting how the names of the 1960s, for the most part, and you early Xers are probably going to agree, fairly, I'm not saying the names in the 70s were abnormal. I just mean, let's take a look at the top 10 guys' names in the 1960s, right? They're the same as like the 50s, probably the 40s. Let's take a look at the 1940s, just real quick. 1940s, James, Robert, John, William, Richard, David, Charles, Thomas, Michael, Ronald, right? And the women's names, Mary, Linda, Barbara, Patricia, Carol, Sandra, Nancy, Sharon, Judith, Susan, right? That's the 1940s. 1950s. The boys, James, Michael, Robert, John, David, William, Richard, Thomas, Mark, Charles. See, this is where the Ted thing comes in, right? And the women, Mary, Linda, Patricia, Susan, Deborah, Barbara, Deborah, Karen, Nancy, Donna, right? My mom was a Donna, right? Popular at the time, but little deviations here and there. But think about it. James and Mary, right at the top, multiple decades. So then you get the 1960s. What do you have? Michael, David, John, James, Robert, Mark, William, Richard, Thomas, Jeffrey. So again, you got the apostle names there, right? Biblical names, straight across, all of them. They're all there, with Jeffrey kind of being like the little outlier in that whole thing, right? What about the women? Here's a new number one. Lisa. You're probably like, kind of makes sense, right? Lisa, Mary, Susan, Karen, Kimberly, Patricia, Linda, Donna, Michelle, Cynthia. So you got some changes in the top 10 for the women, far more so than for the men. Still your Michael, David, John, James, right? The usual. That doesn't change much either, with the exception of a couple of decades. So now, 1970s, the next part of Gen X. Michael, okay, that was on the list, right? Christopher has now made the list. Number 2. How many Christophers do you know, particularly us 70s Xers? Number 3, Jason. David, James, John, Robert. Oh, here's a new one on the list. Brian, William, and Matthew. Matthew's always been a biblical name, but higher on the list than in prior decades. But where the hell did Christopher and Jason come from? That's new information. So in the 1970s, think about this. There were 476,000 Christophers born in the 1970s and 463,000 Jasons born in the 1970s. That's a lot. At the same time, number 1, Michael, classic name, right? And we all had friends who were a Mike or a Mikey, whatever. 707,000. But what's even more of a stark contrast, because most of that list, Christopher, Jason, and Brian were kind of newer on the list. Matthew, that had a whole, resurgence in the 70s. The girls' names, to me, if I'm reading this correctly, changed significantly for your top 10. And the first four, really, you're going to be like, yup. Jennifer, Amy, Melissa, Michelle, Kimberly, Lisa, Angela, Heather, Stephanie, Nicole. This is like my entire graduating class. The Christophers, the Jasons, the Jennifers, the Amys, the Nicoles, the Heathers, the like, it's uncanny. So in my graduating class, I was one of, let's see, me. I want to say there were 5 Jasons. That's six, including me. 6 Jasons, possibly a 7th. Did he graduate with us? And at least another 4 or 5 more in the junior class. Like, in the whole school, there were probably 20 Jasons. Let's see, Christophers. My best friend was a Christopher, but I don't remember a ton of them in my class at school. I don't know, maybe they were on the other side of town over at Platt High School. Tons of Brians, tons of Matthews, right? Yeah, I mean, those are just tried and true names, right? Yeah, a few Brians, that's definitely true. But then Jennifer, let's see. Like, I remember there were 2 Jennifers that were like best friends, but they were friends with her, and she was Jennifer. And then this one was a cheerleader. I didn't really know her, but I mean, I'm going to put that at another probably 7, at least another 5 Amy's, handful of Melissas, definitely a few Kimberlys. Heather, in our class, I think there were less Heathers, but in the school, like, there's a reason that you have a movie, Heathers, with all those Heathers. Like, it just makes perfect sense to me. But I'm looking at this list, and then you even scroll down further. How many Jessicas did we know? And let's see, Shannon's, Amanda, because I knew a couple of Mandys, Tammy, Tracy, Tina, tons of Tinas, knew a couple Aprils. I didn't know any Wendy's until adulthood, and one of them was when I worked at Urban Outfitters, and the other was a woman who was in her 70s, and kind of odd that she was Wendy, but that must have been right from Peter Pan. Stacy, that's another one. Now, Stacy is number 38 on this list, which blew my mind, because I felt like I knew another like 4 or 5 just Stacys, like tons of them. And then, no offense, over on the guy's side at number 41. So if you're listening to this and this is your name, I'm sorry. Todd. And I doubt he's listening to this, but Todd, you know who you are, Todd. You know who you are. And you know why. You know why. But anyway, Aaron's, a bunch of guys named Aaron, right? That was common. And then this was real rise in this name. And I knew one, and we were both wooing the same girl. But if the meme of 2024, I guess it's really, the meme's been around for a few years now, you can't compete. So the girl whose affections that I was seeking, her name was Jennifer. But Jennifer, she decided, because we both asked her to go out on a date. She went with the blonde, blue-eyed Chad. Yeah, Chad. If you're a Chad and you're listening to this, how does it feel to be a meme Everyone thinks you're super confident, thinks you're freaking great. You want to be a real Chad. Well, guess what? I want to kick Chad's ass if I was a gentleman. What are you going to do? She didn't choose me. She chose Chad, which made it all the more hilarious when I showed up at her 18th birthday party with one of her best friends who was my girlfriend at the time. And we danced all night long. And I said, take that. You're not with Chad no more, are you? No, you're not. Oh, a bunch of Erics, Kevins. So anyway, that's Sarah's. We had a ton of Sarah's. That's 1970s. Now, just as a matter of juxtaposition, let's see how much things changed in the 1980s. So in the 1980s, man, the Jasons are already down number 11. But Christopher is still up there at number 2. But Matthew has now risen with a bullet up to number 3. Joshua, David, James, Daniel, Robert, John, Joseph. So kind of the tried and true standards. The 80s, still a ton of Jessicas and Jennifers. Amanda has now ascended. Ashley definitely became much more popular then. Sarah, Stephanie, Melissa, Nicole, Elizabeth, Heather. And now Tiffany has gone up from like the 30s or something up into number 11. Oh, and Amber. We had a few Ambers as well. Now, here's what's so curious to me. To me, the best television or movies or whatever they are tend to be a reflection of the time. Now, I mentioned the 1960s, right? So there's one thing that I noticed here that is glaring. So let me just, let's see. Well, I mean, I guess that's not that far down. Let's see if it's 19. I need to pull something up here. Look up the name in real life of a particular actor. Okay, so he was born in 54. All right, so 1950s. Let's go there and see. I guess it's top 25. Well, let's see. I'm just trying to figure out how on earth you would have these names that seem to be so commonly used, right, in common parlance everywhere. And yet there hasn't always been I think, a correlation directly into cinema. So I was just looking up the Brady Bunch, right? So that show aired in the 60s, and that means the kids were all born in the 50s. So the kids were all boomers, right? So Barry Williams is the oldest, 1954, but his character's name was what? Greg. Well, Gregory is down at number 26, so not a ton. And of course, you know, Bobby, right? He's Robert, number 3. You know, so where's Peter? Again, another biblical name. And Peter's down at number 39. But you know, it's nowhere to be found on here from what I can tell. I don't see Marcia. Janice is down at number, so Jan Brady would be down at number 24. And no Cindy, right? So the reason Cindy is down at number 48, right? So I guess common, but not like super popular. But you would think, I'm just going to use Friends as an example. So all the Friends were born in the 70s. All of them. Jennifer Aniston, yes, her real name. What's her character's name? Rachel, right? Rachel's on the list, but buried pretty far down. Well, I mean, number 33, there were 77,000 Rachels. But do you know any Chandlers? No. Chandler's not on the list. Yeah, Joey's on the list, but what about, I've never met a single Chandler in real life. What about Ross? Ross is not on the list. Where is Monica? I'm just using that as an example because it's like one of the most popular shows that featured all, like Monica is number 45. Phoebe's not on there at all. Surprise, surprise. You know what I mean? So it's like, you figure that every other show coming around that time, everyone would have like one of these names that's so popularly part of whatever's in the name, whatever's in the zeitgeist at the time. But that really doesn't seem to be the case. And I'm also like really surprised, like when you look at like top grossing movie stars, right? And maybe it's because some of them just never become famous, but like of the heavy hitters in Hollywood. So like obviously number one like is like Samuel L. Jackson because he's been in everything. But Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, Thomas, right? Robert Downey Jr., Johnny Depp, that's John, right? The only ones that are really indicative of kind of like their time frame, which is Gen X into early millennial, Chris Pratt, Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, right? The Christophers. Well, they were number two, right? Back-to-back decades. Your Matt Damons. But I'm looking at the names and I'm like, Bradley Pitt, Mark Ruffalo's not that good. He just happened to be in a couple of big movies. Look, a couple of Pauls, but they're boomers, I believe. No, they're Gen X. You got your Owens, but then all the standard names, your Steves, your Anthonys, your Johns. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. And then like think about a show like Dawson's Creek, right? Pacey, Dawson. I mean, these aren't real names, like at all. And like I think about a show like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, another one of my favorites, right? Buffy. Freaking Buffy, Willow, Xander, Cordelia, Harmony. Like these are the names. And it's just never been like really super reflective of what the actual names are that are in popular usage. But just for those of you who are grandparents, let's see. This made me laugh. So the 2000s, right? So that's when my kids were born. That would be their decade. So I had all my kids between 2000 and 2010. Here are the boys' names. Oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, this is true. Jacob, Michael, Joshua, Matthew, Daniel, Christopher. Oh, you know what? They didn't become more popular until the 2010s? No. Hold on. Oh, interesting. So I had done a breakdown going each year, which got, okay, this is for the whole decade. That's right. Cause I didn't want to go year by year. So I went with decades. Hold on. So let's do names and we're going to go by year. All right. So we're going to go back to, let's say 2005. Jacob, Michael, Joshua, Matthew, Ethan, Andrew, Daniel, Anthony, Joseph, Christopher. Okay. And the girls are Emily, Emma, Madison, Abigail, Olivia, Isabella, Hannah, Samantha, Ava, Ashley. Seems about right. So let's go 07. Sorry about that. Oh my gosh. Everyone on my floor at work sounds like this. Okay. 07. Jacob, Michael, Ethan, Joshua, Daniel, Christopher, Anthony, William, Matthew, Andrew, and the girls. Emily, Isabella, Emma, Ava, Madison, Sophia, Olivia, Abigail, Hannah, Elizabeth, Addison, few of those. Let's see. 08. Emma, Isabella, Emily, Olivia, Ava, Madison, Sophia, Abigail, Elizabeth, Chloe. Same thing. Jacob, Michael, Ethan. But when did all the Oh, there's Jaden, Aiden, Logan. And then let's go to last couple here. Excuse me. Yeah, Isabella, Emma, Olivia, Sophia, Ava, Emily, Madison, Abigail, Chloe, Mia. Yeah, those, have all just stuck. They've all just stuck and just been there on top over and over and over again. So, for all I know, you have an Isabella, an Emma, an Olivia, a Sophia, an Ava, an Emily, an Madison, an Abigail, a Chloe, and Mia. And, none of, hold on. Yeah, I don't think any, I think the highest one of my kids' names was top 30. And that's about as high as it went. Not because we weren't necessarily, well, I guess we weren't. We were not looking in like the same places, I guess. Like we did the book thing and never really got much further. Like we highlighted a couple of names, but we were really more just listening to how different names sounded. And ultimately, our daughter and our youngest are named after family members. And even their middle names are family names. It's really our oldest is the only one that we just were kind of like spitballing names. And that was the name that just hit us. Boom. There it is. What middle name goes with it along with our last name. Boom. Done. And it was all very organic. You know, it was just like, okay, let's just think of names. And I was trying to think of things that go with this ridiculous last name. And there we had it. So anyway, that's really all this episode is about tonight. Or this morning, or whenever it is that you're listening to this podcast. What's in a name? And then, well, let's see what's happening nowadays, shall we? Let's just take a look at what happened in 2022. Okay. Girls, Olivia, Emma, Charlotte, Amelia, Sophia, Isabella, Ava, Mia, Evelyn, Luna. Oh, Luna's top 10. Harper, Camilla, Sophia, Scarlett, Elizabeth, Eleanor. Wow, Eleanor. Emily, Chloe, Mila, and Violet. Interesting array. A couple of classics coming back. The boys. Liam, Noah, Oliver, James, Elijah. That was on our list. William, Henry, Lucas, Benjamin, Theodore, Mateo, Levi, Sebastian, Daniel, Jack, Michael, Alexander, Owen, Asher, and Samuel. I will tell you, I have nephews named Henry. And let's see. We have Sam. Let's see. We got a Jack. One of our good friends has a Levi. Yeah, so I have a brother, Eli. That was a whole thing because it was a name that was on our short list before we were married. And my father reproduced with his third wife before me and my first and only wife had kids. So that's fine. The two names that were kind of on the list were Amos and Eli. He took both of those because he had two kids before we married. Anyway, yeah. But Sebastian, that's a big name for a kid. That's a big name. Asher's been around for a long time. Never been a huge fan of it. I don't know. I like Ash. You know what I mean? But a lot of guys back in the day had the name Ashley. Like that was a guy's and girl's name. Same thing with Lindsay. Lindsay has since become just a girl's name. But yeah. Very interesting to see Scarlett. That's probably because of Scarlett Johansson. Let's be honest. It's a popular actress name. Amelia is a good name. I knew a couple of Charlottes. That was a 70s name, I think. Anyway. The names of Gen X. And I have one of the most basic 1970s. Here's the name. I guess yeah. It was popular. It was probably in a baby book. It's probably on the newsstand at the grocery store. Popular names of 1974. Oh, let's go with that one. So tell me, what are some of your favorite names, and do you have a stereotypical Gen X name? Are you a Jennifer, an Amy, a Heather, a Jason, a Christopher, an Eric? Are you one of those? Let me know. And do any of your kids have one of those names? A Caden, a Braden, an Aiden, a Sophia, and Olivia, and Emma. I say Isabel already? Isabel and Isabella. Different names. Add the A, remove the A, whatever. And Ava. Excuse me. Let me know. And how can you do that? You can email me at stuckinmiddlepod@yahoo.com. You can find me on Instagram, X, and YouTube at StuckPodX. Head on over to the Facebook page, Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast. Please like, comment, share, leave 5-star reviews, and most importantly, please subscribe to the podcast. So until next time, later, slackers.